Good luck.
Thank you very much for coming in this evening.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it. Just two ground rules. What we'll do is we'll just let everybody, and what we'll do is we'll just allow you up to 5 minutes for kind of an opening.
There's two right there.
And then we'll go into 45 minutes of questioning, and I'll allow you up to 2 minutes to give an answer. You may start timing around, he's going to say, wow, the question answering. And then I'll allow you up to closing. So
Okay.
if you want to start off and tell us who you are and what course you're running for, and why, and go from there.
I'm Edie Conley. Thank you. I'm Edie Conley. I am the Justice of the Peace for Precinct 3 in Montgomery County. I've been the Justice of the Peace for 26 years. Prior to that, I was with Montgomery County Sheriff's Department for about 9 years. Most of that time I served as a detective sergeant working child abuse, sex crimes, domestic violence, that kind of thing. Prior to that, I was a police officer in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and I worked under criminal vice and narcotics. So I've been in a law enforcement related area for quite a long time now. When I first ran for the office of Justice of the Peace, I don't know if any of you have lived here as long as I have, but the Justice of the Peace at that time had been indicted for theft and malfeasance in office, and he, along with the commissioner and the county auditor, were charged with offenses, and so he was removed from office. There was an interim Justice of the Peace who was appointed for about 6 months, and he was appointed with the understanding that he wouldn't run for office. So when I ran for office, there were 9 people in the primary. There was a runoff. There was a runoff, yes. And then the person that I opposed in the runoff filed as a write-in candidate in the general election. That's not allowed anymore, but it was then. Since that time, I was opposed 2 more times, and I've been unopposed up until now. I'm married. My husband and I have 3 children who are all grown. Our oldest daughter lives in Dallas, and she has given us many, many, many grandchildren. She and her husband, but sometimes I have to count on my fingers. She and her husband had 5 children. 2 of them are out of the house. The oldest boy is a junior at Texas A&M. Then they became foster parents, and they've since adopted 3 of the children from foster care. Our middle daughter and her husband live right down off Old Conroe Road. They bought about 7.5 acres and built their own home down there. And they have 2 children, Andrew and Meredith, who are the kids I bake cookies for all the time. Our son is, he and his wife are in Canada now, but he went to West Point and graduated #1 in his class and first captain for the Corps of Cadets. He served for 7 years and served in Iraq. He got out, went to Harvard, received a double master's, and now he works for a private equity firm based in Houston, but they transferred him to Canada. Very sad. They have 3 little girls, and they were just down here over the Thanksgiving holidays. I think I delayed my interview because of that, and I apologize, but I hadn't seen him in a long time, so That's important.
I really wanted to be with him. Some of the things that I'm most proud of, besides my family, the work that I've done with the Justice Court. I was very concerned when I first took office because of the financial state of the office, financial accounting were non-existent. I think I brought that office from where it was at that time to an office that's very transparent. We do good work, and I'm proud of my staff and proud of the work that we've done.
That wasn't me.
No, that's somebody coming in the door. Okay, well, appreciate that, and so what we do from here is just go around the table.
Sure.
And everybody has a chance to ask their own questions, whether it's from the questionnaire pertinent to that, or anything they want to, related to the position. So what I'll do is throw it over to Larry and let him go, and then we'll just go count, or excuse me, clockwise.
Explain, we heard the term docket backlog. Explain that. What is that? Maybe I said it wrong. Maybe it's a different terminology.
Docket backlog. I would assume that the words docket backlog would mean that there were cases sitting with nothing being done, languishing in the files.
Or backlog of cases.
In the county, is that all the JP offices, is there a figure that you go by, or kind of try to keep it below or anything?
I wouldn't say that in the county there is, but the state has some very strict reporting requirements. I think I mentioned in my questionnaire that anyone can go to Texas Courts Online, and there is an extensive form, a report that's filed every month. You can look at the number of cases that are filed, and then you can look at the number of cases that are disposed of during a specific period of time. I believe that consistently our court disposes of more cases than are filed. With that said, there are an awful lot of cases that are filed in our court. So while in a particular period of time we may dispose of many cases, we will still have many cases on our docket to be heard.
How many is that? The outstanding?
Outstanding over what period of time? I mean, I don't have a way of giving you a strict answer. I can tell you that in a month's period of time, we may have, well, in a year's period of time, we may have 34,000, 36,000 cases on the docket.
How many? 30 or 40?
36,000.
36,000 cases on the docket.
But is there like a backlog of cases that goes back? Is it?
Well, it would carry forward, wouldn't it?
It would carry
Year
forward.
to year?
Yes.
Mhm.
And see, you have to define what you mean by backlog. Are you talking about a case, an adjudicated case where monies have not been?
No, just where your role has not happened.
I don't think we
Have a backlog?
have a backlog in
Okay.
that sense of the word.
All right. Is that what you meant?
Yeah. Okay, Brian?
So say that you've got a case and you've got a business owner, an individual, and the business owner, I'm sorry, a credit card case. So you've got a lawyer
Okay.
suing somebody over credit card non-payment, and the lawyer for the company has a bill that they owe, the amount that they owe, and the individual says I had a dispute over them and didn't work it out, and the lawyer does not produce a contract for agreement, application agreement. So how do you rule in that case? For the credit card company or for the?
I'm precluded from answering how I would rule on a specific case. I can tell you that the rules are very specific, that there are certain requirements that a credit card company or any plaintiff would have to show by preponderance of the evidence, whether or not
So
someone.
do the rules require the lawyer to, the
Generally in credit card cases, there's no contract. When you apply for a credit card, you don't have a written contract. You have an application,
Right.
and when you start using that credit card, there is an understanding that you've accepted the terms of that credit card.
And that's not a contract?
No, I didn't, you don't have a written contract in the sense that if someone is building a home for you, you sit down and you both look at the terms of the agreement and you sign, yes, I will do this.
Right.
With a credit card, your use of that credit card is your acceptance of the terms that they've given to you.
Not the application.
Not the application, your use of that credit card. You know, credit card cases have been the bane of justice courts in the state of Texas for a long, long time. And I think in the beginning, there were many justice courts that they were just inundated with them. And over the course of the next couple of years after that we first started seeing all those companies file, the Justice Court Training Center has assisted many, many courts in not just understanding the rules that apply to those cases, but also things to look for in the petition itself. I don't know if I answered your question.
And you're not a lawyer, right?
No, I'm not an attorney.
I know there are a lot of times when there's some city slicker lawyer in front of you and the opposition is just some poor old country boy.
Mhm.
And there's an opportunity to manipulate and mismanage that case. The state in several places in the law say that a JP should help develop the case or help develop the facts of the case. What does that mean to you and how do you do that?
I can ask questions. I might mention to you that the rules have changed. In the past, I hate that thing. In the past, we had a justice civil court and we had a small claims court. The justice civil court had to follow the rules of evidence. Small claims court did not. The plaintiff had the luxury of deciding in which court to file it. Now, the Supreme Court has promulgated new rules for our courts. It's all called the Justice Court, but the rules have been changed to more closely align with a small claims court case. So, if I have an attorney and a person who has no legal knowledge, I can ask questions. I can determine which rules should apply and which shouldn't. So, to answer your question, the Justice Court was meant to be a court where ordinary people could come, have their cases heard, and have it fairly adjudicated. It wasn't supposed to be a place where attorneys played games to see who could.
So there's not really small claims anymore?
It isn't called small claims anymore, but the rules are more closely what the original small claims.
But you just have one court, I mean, it's JP?
Yeah, it's just the Justice Court now.
And the limit is $10,000?
10,000, yes. Still, thank goodness.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, got a good resume in law enforcement, and I know those justice court training seminars for 26 years while you've been in office. But really, I guess I'm curious as if you don't have a law degree, what prepared you to be a justice, a judge, I would assume that it takes a fairly good understanding of the law. So how did you prepare for that?
All of those things that I mentioned to you in my questionnaire, I was in law enforcement for a long time. I had to know criminal law to be an adequate detective, to be able to investigate cases. When I was elected Justice of the Peace, I guess my biggest challenge wasn't criminal law, it was civil law. And over the course of all those years, in addition to the Justice Court training seminars, I've attended Bar Association seminars. In short, I've gone to as many schools as I could to gain a fair understanding, I think a good understanding of the way the law
Are there
works.
cases where you feel you were wrong?
Oh, well, sure. And there are cases where I feel that the law demanded that I rule a certain way when maybe I would have preferred not to. But my job is to follow the law. It's not to make laws or change the law, it's to follow the law.
I'm going to not let you off as easy as Brian did. A similar case. A debtor claims, well, there's a lawyer shows up and a debtor shows up. Lawyer represents, we'll say, American Express. And the debt owed is $6,500, all right? And the debtor objects because there was no copy of the signed agreement that you were talking about to Brian. Also says there was a rewards, the reason he quit payment or they quit payment was the rewards of $2,000 were denied, so they just ceased it. Now here's the kicker. The man says, well, to begin with, it wasn't his card, it was his wife's card. She's the one that signed the application. And the attorney uses the argument you gave, well, but you made some charges with the card. And so they considered it a joint account. So how would you rule on this with no copy of the agreement, nothing with his signature on it, just a
Don't ask
claim?
her how she ruled, ask her what the rules say she's supposed to do.
Well, it's a hypothetical.
Well, I can't tell
She
you though
can't
how I
rule.
would
She
rule
can't
this.
rule.
You know,
Okay.
you'd be surprised how many of these kinds of things I have actually heard.
Yeah?
So I would say some of the issues in the situation you're talking about,
Mhm.
husband, wife married at the time the debt was incurred, it's
Yeah, that's
probably community
presumed.
property. As
So you're
far
saying the
as,
husband then would be as obligated as the wife would be?
generally in the state of Texas, a debt incurred while people are married is a community debt, generally.
So they could come after the husband's private property that the
Well,
wife
no,
has
I-
no ownership in.
No,
See, when
not
they say community
necessarily.
property, that usually is with regards to death and divorce. It's probably a mistake to say that a husband and a wife can't own separate property, which it sounds like that's what you're saying.
No, that's
No?
really not what I'm
Well,
saying.
feel free, you can correct me.
I'm just saying, these are the issues. I'm not saying
Right.
whether they would be correct or incorrect.
Mhm.
You would want to know, first of all, most of those credit card cases, it's not the original debtor who's filing. It's
Right.
not Capital One, for example, that you actually got the credit card.
So would you
From-
require proof that the lawyer is representing the right party? Because as you
Of
said,
course.
it says American Express something else in the state. How does the defendant go, well, I never paid any bill to them?
Of
How do you
course.
deal with those issues?
Because usually in cases like that, what will happen is Capital One will exhaust their efforts to collect.
Right.
They'll write it off. They sell that debt to.
Well, no, in this case, it's actually American Express that's filing it, not a,
Okay,
collection
so it's the
agency.
original debtor.
Yes. Well, except the name has changed, because they're using some state agency, it says American Express something or other, but it doesn't say American Express
It sure
Corporation.
does sound like you're asking me how I would rule on a particular case.
Well, what I'm describing, if I don't have to say American Express, I would have said MasterCard, but then those are based on the bank that they're on. Well, it
Pay
goes
the
back
bill,
around.
James.
What's that?
Pay the bill.
James,
Oh, my rewards.
Been there.
okay.
You might have a counterclaim, you never can tell.
Shifting gears just a little bit, what's your knowledge of Sharia law? And how would it, you think it could possibly impact your court in the under $10,000 level from that perspective?
What, don't you deal with juveniles or something like that in respect to? Right.
Sharia law. Well, first, I follow the laws of the state of Texas and of the United States of America. I don't believe that Sharia law comes into play in that. I can't claim to have a vast knowledge of Sharia law. To answer your question, how could it come into play in my court? I would say, because I follow the laws of the state of Texas and the rules that the Supreme Court of Texas have promulgated for my court, those are the rules I follow. I don't know how it would come
Could I
about.
expand on that?
Yeah.
Well, let's say that there's a juvenile in the court, a 13-year-old, who doesn't want to go to the mosque. The father says, yes, he must go to the mosque. And their mother and father are there in the court. And you ask the mother, and the mother says, no, he doesn't have to go to the mosque. What would you do?
I wouldn't hear that case. It wouldn't come before me.
So you're
I don't
saying
know
that-
what he would be. I don't believe in America
Well,
we have forced religion, so.
Well, remember now,
So this
with-
is- I
where
wouldn't have
juveniles are
jurisdiction.
concerned, they can be charged with, I forget what the Texas term is, basically misbehavior. They're out of control. They don't ever come to your court because they're out of control?
No, there are specific criminal laws that they would have had to have broken before it would have come to my court.
Could it be a civil case where the parent is suing?
I
That
can't
wouldn't be
imagine
your
that I would
court,
have
would it?
jurisdiction over that.
Okay, be a family law.
Okay.
Good try.
All right.
Claire?
In the questionnaire, number 3, it says, what goals do you have in mind if you're elected? And you're stating that the rapid growth of Montgomery County Precinct 3 in particular requires greater use of technology and common sense management.
Mm.
You serve on the technology committee, which is appointed by the Commissioners Court. When was that? In other words, is that something that's new? or-
Yes, fairly new.
And what
been about
what are
2
they
years.
using for your court?
Right now,
Electronically speaking.
yes, right now we have a data management system that has been put together by the IT departments over the course of the many years that I've been
It's
there.
paid for by your court, or how does
No,
that
no, no.
work?
Through the county.
Through the county?
Our budget comes strictly from the county. I
Right.
don't get to say, you know.
Where your traffic tickets go to?
No, no. All the money that we receive through our office goes directly to the county or the state of Texas. It doesn't stay in our office.
So you're not involved in
But-
collection of those, you're saying? The county does that?
The collection of.
Of fines, tickets, fees?
Oh, sure we are. Well, collection in the sense that if you don't pay your fine, there are
Right.
certain steps I can take to compel that. But to answer your question, the technology committee has been in existence for 2 to 3 years. We looked at a number of different products. There are very few products out there that actually have the capability of providing an integrated system for the entire county, which I think is extremely important. I don't believe that county offices or departments need to have their own separate, standalone data management system because it precludes our ability to interact with one another. It limits the kinds of technological advances that we could have. Some of the things that I want to see instituted, electronic ticket writing, the ability of an officer to write a ticket on the street with something similar to, you know, UPS has the sign here, and then at the end of the day have that information, that data directly downloaded to our data management base so that my clerk wouldn't have to sit and enter a ticket.
How far away are you from getting something like that?
Our information technology department tells me we're close, but you have to understand, I've been asking for this for a number of years, so I'm
Were
keeping
they
my
involved in the
fingers crossed.
Obamacare website rollout at all?
Oh, my goodness, I hope not.
So you're not comfortable telling us like your opinion on curfew, day curfew, is that against the canon code?
Well, not the law, but what's your opinion of that law? You can have your opinion, has no effect on your ruling, correct?
Right.
Okay, so let me ask the next question. So on night curfew, you know, currently it's a county and state curfew, and then day curfew too. Is that a good or bad thing
A
during
day
school hours?
curfew.
Pardon?
A day curfew. Right now, the
curfew.
county has a night curfew.
Correct.
Do I think we should have a day curfew?
Well, the question is, what do you feel about night curfews? And then what do you feel about day curfews for school, during school hours?
Is it a justified intrusion?
I
of
can tell
parental
you what I
authority?
feel and I can tell you what
Sure.
I think.
Sure.
I feel that parents should set their children's curfews, and those curfews should be obeyed. I feel that parents should have the ability and the discipline to be able to ensure that their children are where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there. I did that for my children, and I don't think it's an unwieldy burden.
Did you ever have to get the JP involved?
No, never. I think that law enforcement thinks that a curfew is a useful tool. I'm not sure I like that
To
term.
prevent juvenile crime, that night stuff, that kind
To
of.
prevent juvenile crime,
Right.
that kind of thing. But I think we have so many laws on the books that a curfew isn't always necessary. We've had a curfew in Montgomery County for a number of years, and I've seen a number of kids in my court for curfew violations. Almost without exception, what's happened is they've been doing something else that they shouldn't have been doing, and the curfew was a way to charge them with something. You know, they shouldn't have been maybe drawing graffiti, or they've been hanging around someplace where they shouldn't have been. Again, I have to go back and say that I really feel, idealistic as it may be, that parents need to be able to set curfews for their children.
Yeah, you confused me. You said it's idealistically don't, but then you said it's practically helpful. That's what I heard you say.
Oh, no, I said law enforcement thinks it's practically helpful.
Okay, I have a pre-question that just requires a head nod.
May I say this, though? May I say this?
Yeah, the day curfew too.
The Montgomery County curfew is an ordinance in Montgomery County. I follow that ordinance, and I try cases under that ordinance.
Okay, are you aware that across the nation in state and federal courts, there have been a number of courts that have ruled based on Sharia law? Just-
Oh, yeah.
I've heard of it.
yeah. Okay. Do you have a personal goal, or what are your numbers for overturn of your rulings on appeal?
Do I have a personal
Personal
goal?
goal. I mean, you don't expect all to be upheld, do you?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
You see, in the justice court, an appeal isn't because an error's been made. An appeal is because a person, a party, did not agree with the decision that was made in that court,
So it goes to,
the
Next
county
level.
court.
County
And
court.
it's tried de novo.
Starts over.
It starts brand new, over.
Okay.
I would like to think that my rulings are so fair that no one would ever appeal them, but that's totally unrealistic, and it's just not true. I'm aware that many times, for example, in eviction suits, appeals are used as a way of,
Delay.
yes, delaying the process.
Yeah.
So we know how many have been overturned?
Not
I
overturned.
mean, they're not technically overturned, they
appealed.
just ruled differently. Huh?
Right.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
No.
Because I would think there'd be a lot of cases where it could really go one way or the other, and either you would, I guess as a personal philosophy, want to side with the deep pocket big guy, or maybe with the poor little citizen. And if that's the case, then you wouldn't expect that none of them would be overturned.
I'm sorry, I don't think I followed you there.
Well, I think that if it's a total toss-up,
Mhm.
okay, you can go with either in the case again of an individual versus a corporation. You could rule with the attorney, or you could maybe give the individual the benefit of the doubt and expect that it might come back the other way.
I would say this kind of as a legal answer. In a civil case, it's by preponderance of the evidence. If the plaintiff doesn't prove their case by just a little bit, it goes to the defendant. Do you follow what I'm saying?
Okay. I had that experience one time, Dell.
Okay. Question 15 talked about percentage of criminals that can be reformed, but one of the comments you made in there, you encourage, let's see, what is it? The principle of restitution. How often does that come into play in your court? Is that something that you see as a very effective tool? Do you tend to lean toward that? Do you tend to shy away from it? How does that all interact with your particular court?
I think when I was when I said that, I was thinking along the terms of, for example, a case where perhaps a juvenile had been charged with criminal mischief. Might be required to make restitution to repair whatever, excuse me, damage was done, for example. I don't know if you're thinking in those same terms.
More or less, yes. I don't know how often, whether that's 1 out of every 2 cases you see, 1 out of every
No.
100. What is the most effective way of dealing with those?
Criminal mischief cases or
Anything where restitution is an option at least.
Restitution would be an option, for example, in a hot check case. I would say that in a civil case, when you fine for the plaintiff, in essence, you're finding restitution. In a criminal case, it depends on the circumstances. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be evasive, I just don't quite know how to answer your question.
Okay. Well, one of the real problems nationwide is prison overcrowding. And there is a lot of discussion about people being put in prison when maybe an alternative punishment would be more suitable. And so I'm just trying to find out what the, whether you, in your experience, have seen restitution as a viable alternative, whether you something you lean toward or shy away from.
I wouldn't say I shy away from it. I would say that if the case seemed to demand that, then certainly I would be in favor. You have to understand that in our courts, jailing someone or prison is not a punishment
Right.
that we can impose. So jail time isn't done for punishment's sake.
Okay.
All right, we have about 10 minutes of questions.
I'll go next.
Oh, no.
It'll take 10 minutes.
Now, I'm not asking for a ruling.
Pretty
But here's a
You got a
scenario.
minute to ask the question.
Here's a scenario. The police are called, they show up. There is a fellow in a car, motor running, he's drunk as a skunk. No doubt about that, that's not the issue. So now, everybody shows up in your court, the prosecuting attorney, the defendant has no lawyer. And while there, you hear the prosecutor threaten the defendant of escalating it to a DUI. And as I said, the defendant has no lawyer. You spoke earlier that when there was not a defendant, you're able to ask questions. What would you do in that case? Because I'm not asking for a ruling.
When there's-
Unless you say you think there's ready for a ruling, then you can
When
stop
there's-
there.
When there's not, I
Not,
think what I
not a
said
lawyer
was-
for the defendant.
Not a lawyer for the
And we're
defendant,
talking
a
two different
prosecuting
things.
attorney.
We were talking civil cases.
Yeah.
Now we're talking a criminal case.
Now first, do you have jurisdiction over any intoxication cases?
Sure, public
Do you have
intoxication.
jurisdiction over DUIs?
Driving under the influence
Correct.
as a minor, but not
No, it's an adult.
DUIs. No,
Okay,
Make
so
it
that's the
hard.
scenario, the charge is intoxication,
public intoxication.
public intoxication. The prosecutor threatens, you just happen to catch it, the prosecutor threatens to escalate to a DUI. Do you have any role in that or nothing?
Well, first, I would say that I don't know how I will overhear that because any kind of conversations would take place outside my presence.
Well, the prosecuting attorney doesn't like something the defendant says we can always escalate it to DUI. And yes, lawyers will do that, I've seen it.
What would I say about that?
Would you have anything to say?
In
Knowing
what
the facts of the
respect,
case. That-
In what respect? I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
Well, let me ask this. Let's say you were in district court, which you're not, so we're not talking about a JP ruling. District court, that's the scenario. The guy was drunk in the car, motor was running, the police arrive, he's in a parking lot, and they arrest him, charge him with DUI, and the DA's there, Brett Ligon's there prosecuting for DUI. How would you rule if you were a judge in that case? District court, not JP.
I still can't tell you how I would rule in a case.
Well,
I
what
would
would be the
assume
legal
the
issues involved?
You can't get your
The
legal
legal
questions
issues involved
answered
in
here.
a DWI would be
I'm sorry, say that
if,
again? Okay, DUI.
in a
DWI,
DWI,
okay.
yes, would be if the person if you could prove that the person had been driving a
So
vehicle.
they saw the car parked and the motor running.
Under the influence of alcohol,
Right.
and the person was intoxicated to the extent,
Definitely drunk as a skunk. Legally drunk as a skunk.
okay, legally drunk as a skunk. Those would be the things you would have to prove.
Skunks get a bad name.
Well, I'm saying, we're saying that's been proven. The only issue is, the guy was there parked, the police arrived, he was already parked.
Well, public intoxication has a different set of criteria, if you would.
Uh-huh.
You have to prove that the person was in a public place, intoxicated to the point that he or she was a danger to himself or others.
Okay, on that line, would you
Yeah.
feel?
Wait a second, wait a
Time's
second,
up.
wait a second.
Okay.
Time's up. We've gone 30 minutes for question and answer.
He's trying to clear off his legal.
Actually, I was gonna ask another
You cannot
question.
Right here,
give, you
it's
cannot
trying
give
to
free
get
legal
free
advice.
legal-
Leave your credit card home before you get drunk next time.
And I paid my lawyer with a credit card.
And how do you know how drunk a skunk can get? Was it an experiment in college?
Okay.
No, in the Navy.
And the next to last question, the question was, what are the top 3 areas where the budget for this office needs to be adjusted? Number 2, you indicated funding for increased prosecutor
yes.
time for the court. Can you explain that?
Yes, I can. I mentioned to you that we see approximately 36,000 charges filed in my court. Those are criminal charges, not civil. So the options for a defendant would be, they can come in and just pay their ticket. They can come in and say, I would like to try an option that would, I'm not going to contest it, but I'd like to have an option that would keep this charge from being a conviction on my record. That could be done through 2 ways. It could be that the person is eligible to request a driver's safety course, and in the state of Texas, people can do that if they haven't had one in the last 12 months.
James
Or-
takes them all the
Okay. Or they can request a deferred disposition, which is a situation where the judge will postpone the conviction for a period of time. Provided the person does as they're asked to do, the charge would then be dismissed and there wouldn't be a conviction on their record. Usually that involves payment of money. So those are options. If, in my court, if they're requesting a deferred disposition, they have to appear in court before me. But because they're entering a plea of guilty or no contest, I can see them by themselves. Another situation would be where the person is contesting the ticket. In that situation, they would have to come to a pretrial hearing first, and then trial by judge or jury if they if they decided that they wanted to carry it to that extent. It is necessary that we have a prosecutor in our court for those last 3 situations. And we have a prosecutor in our court not even 2 times a week. I see hundreds of people at those court settings. I could use a prosecutor in my court 4 days a week. They're limited in their resources. You asked me what a goal would be. If I were the commissioner's court and I could give me a budget I wanted for my office, that's one of the things I do is give me a prosecutor for my court that I don't have to share.
Is that somebody signed by Brett Lee?
Pardon me?
Somebody assigned by Brett Lee?
Or J.D.
Yes.
Lambright, some, like the
Well,
juvenile,
in
right?
Montgomery County, the district attorney hears all criminal cases.
Right, I meant the juvenile cases. Isn't that
In
by
my
the county
court,
attorney?
no, in my court, the juvenile cases are also district.
District attorney, okay.
So kind of touching on that, and your answer on 18, what have you done to reduce the size of government in your office so far? And you said, your operating budget has been the same for the past 5 years, even though our
Remain
population
fairly
has gone
stable,
up.
yes.
So that tells me that they've limited you on your budget, and you have to adjust and make do with what you got, and reorganize and do it all.
Sure.
So, along that line, how do you, what is the process for you saying, hey, wait a minute, we need I need a prosecutor in here. I'm not getting, maybe twice a week. Can you go to the court and say, Commissioner's Court, and say, guys, we need to make some changes. Here's my budget, and here's what I recommend,
Right.
and then how does that work?
We have done that over the course of the last 5 or 6 years. The Justice Court judges have. And we've gotten more, but I would say that our population here in Montgomery County, and specifically in my precinct, has grown to the extent that it's difficult to keep up with the growth. I mean, I'm sure you all know that infrastructure has a hard time keeping up when growth is very, very dynamic. And we're just like anywhere else. I don't think it's anyone's fault. I think Commissioner's Court has been generally good to the justice courts. What I meant when I answered it that way is we have done some other things, like we hired a part-time person. That was the last one we've had, about 5 years ago, I think she was hired. And that way it could save the money that would be paid for benefits. I think a lot of companies are doing that. We've reduced our use of paper and printing. When we get the new data management system, I think that will improve things a lot, because it's gonna save on staff hours.
Sure. Because it just seems like, all the other budgets get increased, and yours hadn't increased in 5 years. That kind of spooks me.
Salaries increased, so when you look at our budget, you'll see there was an increase, but those were the salaries. Our operating budget, I think I brought it with me. I didn't know what you wanted, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, our operating budget for last year was, just the operating budget, not including salaries and benefits, was $29,816.
I was impressed you to read that.
Well, I have to tell you, I can't really read very much without my glasses. It's the hardest thing I've had about getting old.
So the operating 29,816
Right.
over.
However, the adopted budget was 800, last year was 849,000. I can't read the last three numbers. I can put my glasses on. You can see what they are.
324.
Right.
And what was the first?
And that's
thing?
salary increases. Do you want to see? I might mention too,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I don't know if I gave you figures, but, we receipted for fiscal year, 2012, 2013, we receipted in our office $3,926,255. And, we kept $2,700,000 in the county, the rest went to the state.
Is that, you're obligated to give the rest of that to the state?
The
Like
reason-
1/3 basically.
Those are all fees that are added to fines that courts can charge. I could really tell you some things about that. The state, in an effort to not raise taxes so much, will charge fees, obviously. And some of those fees are charged on criminal cases. And those fees are divided into different areas that can be spent only for certain things. And our courts are required to break that down. So for every $250 fine, we have to break it down into the different areas that it goes to,
Is that
For state.
automated at the moment?
allocated.
Is
Pardon
that
me?
automated at the moment, that breakout, or not?
Not precisely.
Mm.
We're working on that. I personally think the state should say, this is what the fees are gonna be, and the state comptroller should have to break it out instead of the individual courts, but
Mm.
I'm not running for governor, I'm just running for justice of the peace.
So precinct 2 has a
Last question.
huge amount of civil cases, like 20,000 more than everybody else. But precinct 3 has 50,000 criminal cases. That was not last year, but the year before. Why so many, why the disparity? I guess that's mostly tickets, speeding tickets?
Because our population is so huge. Most of my precinct is unincorporated. Precinct 2 has the city of Conroe that comprises most of their area, and all of those criminal charges are filed in the city court, in
So
the
you're the
municipal
speeding
court.
ticket court of the county, basically, because
Oh, Precinct 3, I certainly am, and Shenandoah abolished their court, so now Shenandoah files their tickets in my court, and the county receives the revenue from those tickets. And of course, you know, the Woodlands is not incorporated.
Could I ask a quick one?
What?
Not case law related.
I was,
Oh, wait.
I'm next
Oh.
on Woodlands.
All right.
Well,
Go ahead.
Mine is just a head nodder. If you were a candidate instead of an incumbent, would you be free to answer how you might rule on hypothetical cases?
I don't think so. I think the canon of ethics also requires candidates for judicial
Yeah.
offices to follow those ethical rules.
So-
good note,
Yeah,
guys.
Yeah,
So we waste our time, huh?
no. Could I ask something related to that in terms of comparison?
you can
Okay with you, Dale? Unless you have a burning question, go right ahead.
He has a burning question.
I'll defer to James. You owe me one.
This is,
Oh, gee.
what I'd like you to
That's
do
it for now.
is let us know. Let's just say your opponent is just as smart as you, but has no law enforcement background and no legal background. What would we be in for, and for how long, if we voted you out and voted someone like that in?
I would say there's a very strong learning curve.
How long does that take? With all the mistakes along the way?
A very long period of time. You know, one of the areas that we haven't talked about is
Mhm.
that in Montgomery County, we have no medical examiner.
Oh, yeah, right.
So the justice of the peace acts as a coroner. An inquest is supposed to be and should be an independent investigation into a death where a physician can't certify the cause or an unnatural death.
Mhm.
I would say over the course of my 30-some-odd years, because I saw many when I was a police officer, I've seen death just about any way that someone could die. And I think that that would be very difficult for most people who've never had any kind of medical or investigative experience. Just learning just the law that's involved is significant. It took me a long time to learn everything, and I came into it with a somewhat of a legal background, a law enforcement
So
background.
is there a temporary judge until you get your learning?
No,
That happens?
We wish.
you
OJT.
you get elected and you're on the bench. In fact, I took office January 1st of 1987. I think I held my first trial something like January 6th. I was nervous.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
more nervous than being here today.
well, we appreciate you being here
Yeah.
Huh?
and answering our questions, and especially answering James's questions,
When does mine?
and Brian too as well.
You're so far in debt to all
The
of
head
us.
nod guy here.
You're so far in debt to all of us. All of us.
Well, we're a contract.
Did you
We'd like to
have
allow
a
you up to
Oh,
5
you gave
minutes
it
to
to
go ahead
James.
and present your closing arguments, so to speak.
If you like, I'll turn it to me, that way you don't have to see it.
Oh,
Yeah, she didn't want to, yeah,
Oh,
she,
okay.
it makes her nervous.
Should just hear the ding dong.
no, it made me say, I've got to hurry up and talk fast because I have so much to say. I just like to thank all of you. I really did come into this not knowing what to expect, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I love to teach people about that office. I do. I love it so much, and I love the work that I do so much. And I love all of the juveniles I've seen in my court, bad ones and good ones, and I've seen a lot of all of the above. And I think that if you were to visit, I would thoroughly enjoy showing you around and having you visit the court as well. I can't
As a
say that
defendant
if
or
you,
just-
as a citizen of this county, I can't say that if you appeared
That would be a
before me,
new
you
thing
would
for us.
always be pleased.
No.
But I can say that I would be as fair and unbiased as I could possibly be if you ever did. It's one of the reasons I've really worked hard all of these years to maintain your profile. I mean, I basically work, and my husband and I go home, and we sit out in the garage, and he smokes a cigar, and we play chess almost every
My
night.
kind
So
of-
that's my social highlight.
Yes, that's an interesting game.
That's
It
great.
is interesting,
Yeah,
yes.
super. Any other questions?
Once you've seen us here in the setting, would you be able to rule on our case now?
Certainly, I think I could be fair with all of you.
I'm not sure I want her to, I agree.
Obviously, not for you, for
I
sure.
That'd be nicer.
I think I can speak for everyone. You've been an asset to the community for many, many years,
Yeah.
and we appreciate your service. And thank you so much for coming. And citizen of us.
And I got a question. How do we refer to you? Is it Judge, Justice, Your Honor, Your Highness?
How about
No,
Edie?
just-
How about
Okay, is it
Edie?
okay?
If you were to come to
Yeah,
court, most
no
people would
disrespect.
refer to me as judge in the
Sure.
court,
Okay.
or Your Honor, but I've always just gone by Edie. So, I like Edie.
So if we see you on the street,
Hi, Edie. Yeah, I don't particularly like to have people come up to me in, Starbucks or somewhere and say, Judge, because then everybody looks at you.
Everybody knows what you want.
I tell you,
let me also just say that I really enjoyed your definition or your answer to the question, where is the Constitution a living document?
That was,
Bingo.
oh, in fact, I was reading, I said, Dennis, you got, this is great.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you again coming
Yeah,
in.
thank you very much.
And for your service.
My pleasure. It was really great
Thank you.
seeing all of you.
Appreciate it.
I enjoyed it
Thank you.
very much. Thank
Sounds
you.
like you have a great family.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much for coming.
I think so, but I'm.
All right, man.
I don't know
Have a
how
break.
you have time to bake all those cookies.
I know
They would have been nice, they would have been nice tonight.
You have part of my melted sundae here.
Oh, I see. I actually
Will
have
is
some
here.
cookies in.
Okay, sure.
Okay, well, he has to wait.
Will's here.
This, I really lucky